The day my billionaire grandfather's will was read, I thought I'd at least be remembered with dignity. My father inherited a mansion. My brother Ethan received stocks worth millions. And my aunts walked away with land and yachts. When it was my turn, the lawyer placed a single rusted key in my hand. Dad smirked. A rundown garage. You're nothing, Sophia. Ethan burst out laughing, his voice echoing in the silent room. Humiliation burned through me. But that night, I couldn't let it go. I clutched the key so tightly it cut into my palm. If this was all my grandfather left me, I needed to see why. So, I drove across town to the industrial district. The iron door screeched open, my flashlight trembling in my hand. What I saw inside made my heart stop. There was no way my billionaire grandpa left me this. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been the one person in the family who was always overlooked? I want to know I'm not the only one listening to this. I didn't go back to my apartment. I couldn't face the quiet, the walls that I barely paid rent on, knowing that Brandon was probably popping champagne in a penthouse right now. I drove until the manicured lawns of the suburbs turned into the cracked concrete of Detroit's industrial fringe. The GPS led me to a dead-end street that smelled of sulfur and wet asphalt. The shop sat there like a bruise on the landscape. Corrugated metal, windows clouded with 50 years of grime, weeds growing waist-high around the foundation. It looked abandoned. It looked worthless. It looked exactly like what my father thought of me. I stood in front of the service door, the wind cutting through my coat. In my hand, the magnetic keycard felt light, cheap. A piece of plastic versus the heavy, bonded paper of stock certificates. I almost threw it into the weeds. I almost turned around and drove away. Let the city reclaim this place. Let the rot finish what it started. But I didn't, because if I walked away, they were right. If I walked away, I was nothing. I swiped the card. The reader flashed green with a pathetic little beep. I pushed the heavy metal door open. It screamed on its hinges, a sound like a dying animal echoing into the night. I stepped inside and hit the light switch. Nothing happened. The power was cut. I pulled out my phone. The flashlight beam cutting a thin slice through the darkness. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of old motor oil, cold rubber, and stale tobacco. It smelled like Grandpa Arthur. I swept the light across the floor. It wasn't empty. Shadows loomed in the center of the bay. I walked closer, my footsteps crunching on grit and broken glass. As the light hit the shapes, my breath hitched. Cars. Or what used to be cars. Rows of them. Chassis. Not functioning vehicles, just the skeletons. Vintage sedans, probably mid-60s, stripped of their engines, their interiors, their souls. Just rusted metal frames sitting on concrete blocks, oxidized to a deep, flaky orange. There must have been 6 of them, lined up like soldiers who had died at their posts. I walked down the line, trailing my hand over a fender. Rough, cold, useless. This was it. This was the grand legacy. A scrapyard. A place to store junk that was too heavy to move. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, but it tasted like bile. Dad knew. That's why he smirked. He knew Grandpa had become a hoarder in his old age, keeping scrap metal because he couldn't bear to let it go. And he left it to me, because I was the only one sentimental enough, stupid enough to care. I sat down on a dusty workbench, the fight draining out of my legs. I looked at the rusted hulks. They were garbage. Just heavy, useless garbage. But I'm a historian. I'm an archivist. It's my job to find the story in the debris. It's my job to see value where everyone else sees waste. I stood up. I walked to the main bay door and slid the heavy deadbolt home. Clang. The sound was final. I wasn't leaving. I grabbed a rag from the floor and wiped down the workbench, clearing a space big enough to lie down. If this was my territory, I was going to own it. I curled up on the hardwood, using my coat as a pillow, listening to the wind rattle the corrugated tin roof. I fell asleep, surrounded by rust, guarding a fortune of absolutely nothing. I woke up with a stiff neck and the taste of dust in my mouth. Morning light was filtering through the grime on the high windows, turning the floating dust motes into a haze of gray and gold. In the daylight, the shop looked even worse. It wasn't just old, it was dead. The walls were stained with 50 years of exhaust and grease. The concrete floor was a map of cracks and oil spills. I sat up on the workbench, shivering in my coat. My phone battery was in the red. I had no coffee, no plan, and a magnetic keycard to a building that should have been condemned in the 90s. I needed to do something. Anything to keep from spiraling. I started clearing the rest of the workbench. I shoved aside jars of rusted screws, dried-out gaskets, and spark plugs that looked like fossils. Then my hand hit something solid in the back of the drawer. It was a plastic case. An old cassette player, the kind from the 80s with the chunky buttons. Taped to the front was a piece of masking tape with handwriting that made my heart stop. For Claire. My grandfather's scrawl. Shaky, jagged, unmistakable. I stared at it. My hands were trembling. And it wasn't from the cold. I pressed the eject button. A cassette tape popped out. It was labeled with the same tape. The same ink. I put it back in. I took a breath that rattled in my chest. I pressed play. For a moment, there was just static, white noise, then, a cough, a deep, wet sound that I remembered from his final days in the hospital. Claire, his voice rasped. If you're listening to this, you're sitting in the shop, and you're probably furious. You're probably wondering why the hell I left you a pile of junk while your brother is out buying his third boat. I closed my eyes. Hearing him was like a physical blow. I didn't leave you out, Claire, the voice continued, stronger now. I kept you safe. I frowned at the player. Safe? I had eaten ramen for dinner for 4 years. I had worked double shifts while Brandon partied on a yacht. I watched them, Grandpa said. I watched your father. I watched Brandon. I saw what the money did to them. It's a rot, Claire. It eats your character until there's nothing left but appetite. I gave them everything, and it made them hollow. They don't know how to build anything. They only know how to consume. The tape hissed for a second. I had to keep you hungry. I had to let you struggle. It broke my heart, kid. Every time you asked for help and I said no, it killed me. But I needed you to be made of iron, not paper. I needed you to know who you were, without the checkbook. You're the only one who can carry the weight of what's in this room. You're the only one who won't let it crush you. Tears were streaming down my face, hot and fast. I wiped them away with my sleeve, leaving streaks of dirt on my cheeks. Don't sell the shop, Claire. Look closer. The value isn't on the surface, it's in the bones. I believe in you, I always have. The tape clicked off. I sat there in the silence, the echo of his voice bouncing around the metal walls. He hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't overlooked me. He had been watching me the whole time, protecting me from the poison that had turned my family into vultures. The poverty, the struggle, the rejection, it wasn't a punishment. It was a curriculum. He had been training me. I looked at the rows of rusted cars with new eyes. Look closer, he had said. It's in the bones. I stood up, feeling a strange, vibrating energy in my chest. I wasn't just a victim of a bad will anymore. I was a guardian. Then, the sound of an engine cut through the morning quiet. It wasn't the rattle of a delivery truck. It was the low, throaty purr of a high-performance engine. Precision engineering. Expensive. I walked to the dirty window and looked out. A silver luxury sedan was pulling up to the curb, its tires crunching on the broken glass. The driver's door opened, and a pair of Italian leather loafers stepped into the mud. Brandon. I looked down at my grease-stained hands. I looked back at the cassette player. I shoved it into my deep coat pocket. Let them come. I was ready. Brandon stepped inside, wrinkling his nose as if the air itself was contagious. He looked ridiculous. A $5,000 suit in a room, coated in 50 years of industrial grime. He didn't look at me. He looked at his shoes, checking for mud. Nice place, Claire, he said, his voice dripping with that familiar polished sarcasm. Really captures your aesthetic. Desperation chic? I didn't answer. I just leaned against the workbench, keeping my hand in my pocket, fingers brushing the plastic of the cassette player. He walked over to a rusted oil drum and placed a check on it. The paper was crisp, white, and offensive. $50,000, Brandon said. Right now. I'm doing you a favor. I looked at the check. It was drawn from his personal account. A favor? Look around. He gestured vaguely at the rotting ceiling. This place is a liability. The property taxes alone will bankrupt you in 6 months. Mom and Dad are sick over it. They don't want the embarrassment of a foreclosure attached to the family name. So, I'm stepping up. I'm buying you out. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was the same smile he used when he sold vaporware to tech startups. Take the money, Claire. Go back to your little apartment. Buy some nice clothes. Pretend this never happened. My instinct, honed by years of being the person everyone underestimated, flared to life. Brandon never spent money unless he was buying power. He didn't care about my embarrassment. He cared about his ROI. Why the rush? I asked. I haven't even had the property appraised. His jaw tightened. There's nothing to appraise. It's a teardown. I'm offering you 50 grand for a pile of rust because I'm your brother. Don't be stupid, Claire. Sign the deed over. No. The word hung in the dusty air. Brandon's smile vanished. Excuse me? No, I repeated. I think I'll keep it. He stared at me, his face flushing a dark, ugly red. He snatched the check off the drum. Fine. Rot here. When the city condemns this place, don't come crying to me. He stormed out, his tires spinning in the gravel as he peeled away. I waited until the sound of his engine faded. Then I went straight to the small, glass-walled office in the corner of the shop. I kicked the door open. It was filled with filing cabinets. I started digging. If Brandon wanted this place, there was a reason. He didn't do charity. It took me 20 minutes. Buried under a stack of old invoices was a letter from the City Planning Commission. It was a zoning petition for a multi-level luxury parking structure. The applicant wasn't the city, it was a shell company. BC Holdings. Brandon. He had been planning this for months. He didn't want to save me. He wanted to bulldoze Grandpa's legacy to park Porsches. He was going to pay me $50,000 for a property he probably stood to make millions on. Rage, cold and sharp, flooded my system. It clarified everything. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the business card Mr. Hayes had given me. Claire? His voice was calm. He tried to buy it, I said. He wants to pave it. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Hayes arrived, he wasn't wearing the 3-piece suit he'd worn at the reading. He stepped out of an old pickup truck, wearing grease-stained coveralls, his silver hair tucked under a cap. He didn't look like a lawyer anymore. He looked like the man who had actually run this shop. He walked in, carrying a heavy canvas bag. He looked at me, then at the zoning papers in my hand. Arthur knew, Hayes said. He knew Brandon was sniffing around the district, that's why he left it to you. He knew you were the only one who wouldn't sell out. I don't know what I'm looking for, Mr. Hayes, but I know it's not a parking lot. Hayes smiled, and for the first time, he looked like a co-conspirator. Call me Jim. I wasn't just Arthur's attorney, Claire. I was his head mechanic for 40 years. He didn't trust suits. He trusted people who knew how to use a wrench. He dropped the canvas bag on the floor with a heavy clank. He unzipped it, revealing a set of industrial-grade tools. Impact drivers, grinders, pry bars. Your grandfather didn't leave you a junkyard, Hayes said, handing me a heavy steel wrench. He left you a puzzle. It's time to work. I took the wrench. It was heavy, solid, cold against my palm. Hayes led me to the central car, the rusted 1965 sedan that I had stared at the night before. This one, he said. Arthur called it the Vault on wheels. He spent 3 years building it. Everyone thought he was just tinkering. What am I looking for? I asked. The weight, Hayes said. Start with the side panels. I got to work. I jammed the wrench onto the rusted bolts. They were seized tight. I put my weight into it, grunting with effort. The first bolt screeched and then snapped free. Then the second. Then the third. My arms burned. Sweat dripped into my eyes. This wasn't delicate archival work. This was brute force. It felt good. It felt like I was tearing down every insult my family had ever thrown at me. After 20 minutes, the driver's side panel came loose. Hayes helped me ease it off. It hit the concrete floor with a sound that wasn't right. It didn't clang like sheet metal. It thudded. Heavy, dense. I looked at Hayes. He nodded at the exposed chassis rail. Scratch it. I took a file from his bag. I ran it across the deep orange rust on the frame. The oxidation flaked away. Underneath, there was no steel gray, no iron black. It was a dull, heavy, whitish silver. It didn't shine brightly. It had a deep, lustrous glow that swallowed the light. I touched it. It was colder than steel, heavier. What is that? I whispered. Platinum, Hayes said. Industrial grade. Arthur didn't trust banks, and he didn't trust gold, too soft, too obvious. He melted down his entire liquid fortune into platinum ingots and cast them into car parts. The chassis, the panels, the engine block, it's all platinum, painted to look like rust. I stared at the car. It wasn't a junker. It was a solid block of precious metal. How much? I asked, my voice trembling. At current market rates? Hayes did a quick calculation. Just the chassis is worth about $8 million. The whole collection in this shop? You're looking at north of $20 million. My brother had inherited $45 million in paper stocks numbers on a screen that could crash tomorrow. My father had a mansion that required a staff to maintain. I had $20 million in solid, indestructible metal, disguised as garbage. He knew, I said, the realization washing over me. He knew Brandon would look at this and see trash. He knew Dad would see an eyesore, and he knew you would look at it and see something worth saving, Hayes said. That's why he gave you the shop. You're the only one who passed the test. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It wasn't a text. It was a notification from the security app I'd installed on the shop's front door. Motion detected. I looked at the grainy feed on my screen. A black SUV had just pulled up. My father, Gregory, was getting out. Aunt Patricia was with him, and behind them, looking smug and impatient, was Brandon. They hadn't come to apologize. They had come to take it. I looked at the platinum chassis. Then, at Hayes. I wiped my greasy hands on my coat. Leave the panel off, I said. Let them see. Hayes grinned. I'll stand in the back. I walked to the main bay door. I could hear them outside, my father's booming voice, Patricia's shrill complaints about the mud. I unlocked the deadbolt and threw the door open. They were standing there like a royal delegation visiting a slum. Gregory in his cashmere coat, Patricia clutching her pearls, Brandon checking his watch. Claire, Gregory said, stepping forward. He didn't look at me. He looked past me. At the junk. We need to talk. This nonsense has gone on long enough. Hello, Dad, I said. I didn't step back. I stood in the doorway, blocking their path. To what do I owe the pleasure? We're here to help you, Patricia said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Brandon tells us you're refusing to sell. Honey, look at this place. It's a health hazard. You can't handle this. I have a notary in the car, Brandon cut in, holding up a folder. And a new check, $55,000. That's my final offer. Sign the deed, Claire, don't be an idiot. I looked at them, really looked at them. For years, their judgment had felt like a weight crushing my chest. Now? They just looked small. Greedy. Desperate. You're right, I said. I can't handle this alone. That's why I hired a mechanic. I stepped aside. Come on in. There's something you should see. Gregory stepped over a coil of wire, his face twisting in disgust. Patricia held a handkerchief to her nose. They looked like tourists in a war zone, terrified of getting their outfits dirty. This is ridiculous, Gregory barked, his voice echoing off the corrugated steel. Sign the papers, Claire. Brandon has a buyer lined up. We can end this farce right now. A buyer? I asked, leaning against the fender of the rusted sedan. Is that what he told you? I picked up the folder I'd retrieved from the office. I didn't hand it to Brandon. I tossed it onto the concrete floor at Gregory's feet. It landed with a slap, sliding open to reveal the architectural renderings of a parking garage. BC Holdings, I said. Brandon Carter Holdings. He doesn't have a buyer, Dad. He is the buyer. He's been petitioning to rezone this lot for 6 months. He wants to bulldoze Grandpa's history to build a parking deck for the stadium district. Gregory froze. He looked down at the papers, then at Brandon. You told me you were flipping it to a developer. You said it was a break-even deal. Brandon's slick composure cracked. It's business, Dad. Who cares? It's a dump. I'm doing her a favor. You were trying to steal it, I corrected. You offered me $50,000 for a lot you valued at $4 million in your loan application. You're paranoid, Brandon spat, stepping toward me. It's junk. Look at it. It's piles of rust. Is it? I reached down and grabbed the heavy side panel we had removed. It was leaning against the tire. It took both hands to lift. My muscles strained, but I hoisted it up. Catch, I said. I shoved the panel toward Brandon. He instinctively reached out. The weight hit him like a falling anvil. He grunted, his knees buckling under the unexpected density, and he dropped it. Clang. It wasn't the tinny rattle of sheet metal. It was a dull, heavy thud that shook the floor, the sound of something impossibly dense. Gregory stared at the scratch mark where the file had cut through the orange paint. He saw the dull, silver-white glow underneath. He knew metals. He'd made his fortune in construction materials before moving to real estate. His eyes went wide. That's not steel, he whispered. No, I said, wiping my hands on a rag. It's platinum, industrial grade, the chassis, the engine blocks, the panels, all of it. I gestured around the shop. Grandpa didn't leave me a scrapyard, he left me a vault. You're standing in the middle of $20 million. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched the greed wash over them. It was instant. The disgust vanished, replaced by a hungry, predatory calculation. 20 million. Patricia breathed, her eyes darting around the room. Well, Gregory straightened his coat, his voice suddenly smooth, authoritative. This changes things. Obviously, you can't handle an asset of this magnitude, Claire. We'll need to bring this into the family trust. I'll have my lawyers draw up a conservatorship, so we can liquidate and manage the funds properly. He stepped forward, reaching for my shoulder like he was going to guide a lost child. It's for your own good, sweetheart. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that stopped him in his tracks. My own good? I asked. You don't care about my good. You care about the asset. I am your father, he boomed, trying to summon the authority that used to make me cower. I am the head of this family. You are living in squalor. You have no money, no status, and no power. You need me. No, Dad. You need this. I pointed to the platinum. And that is exactly why you'll never touch it. I looked him in the eye, dissecting him for the first time. You think you're powerful because you have a mansion and a country club membership? I said, my voice steady. But you confuse net worth with self-worth. You think that because you have things, you are something. Gregory's face turned purple. How dare you? Grandpa knew. I cut him off. He knew that if you lost your money, you'd lose your identity. You're just a suit filled with insecurities. Your power is rented, Dad. It disappears the second the check bounces. But me? I held up my grease-stained hands. I built my life on scrap. I know who I am without a bank account. I own my power. You just lease yours. I turned to Hayes, who was standing quietly in the shadows with a tire iron in his hand. Mr. Hayes, I said. Please escort these trespassers off my property. With pleasure, Hayes said, stepping forward. You can't do this, Brandon screamed, his voice cracking. This is fraud. Grandpa was senile. We'll sue you. We'll bury you. Try it, I said. And I'll show the judge the zoning application where you tried to defraud your own sister. Get out. Gregory looked at me one last time. He didn't see the daughter he could bully anymore. He saw a stranger made of iron. He turned and walked out, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. Brandon scrambled back as Hayes approached, his face a mask of panic. He didn't even pick up his folder. He just ran. He ran out the door, jumped into his silver sedan, and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust that settled over the weeds. It was over. The engine noise faded into the distance, leaving only the quiet hum of the city and the wind rattling the tin roof. Hayes walked over to the office door and came back with a second envelope. It was thick, sealed with wax, just like the first one. Arthur said to give this to you if you didn't sell, Hayes said, handing it to me. And if you were willing to get your hands dirty. I took the envelope. My hands were still covered in grease, leaving black smudges on the heavy paper. I broke the seal. Inside wasn't a letter, it was a deed. And a bank statement. The deed was for the entire city block surrounding the shop. Grandpa hadn't just bought the garage, he had bought the neighborhood. He had been quietly acquiring the abandoned warehouses and empty lots for 20 years. And the bank statement showed a trust fund. A community revitalization trust. Liquid assets. $20 million. I stared at the numbers. They blurred through my tears. He didn't just want me to be rich, I whispered. He wanted me to be a builder. He wanted you to be the architect, Hayes corrected. He knew this neighborhood was dying. He knew Brandon would just pave it over. He needed someone who would see the value in the bones, someone who would restore it, not erase it. I looked around the shop. I didn't see a junkyard anymore. I saw a community center. I saw a vocational school where kids could learn to work with their hands. I saw a museum of automotive history. I saw a future. I walked out of the shop and stood in the empty lot, breathing in the cool night air. The city lights of Detroit shimmered in the distance. A grid of electricity and potential. My father had a mansion that was already starting to crumble. My brother had stocks that he would probably gamble away in a year. I had a city block. I had $20 million. And I had a legacy that was built on iron, not paper. I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I wasn't the invisible daughter. I was the one who passed the test. If you've ever felt like the world or your own family has written you off, remember this. They don't know what you're made of. They see the rust, but they don't see the platinum underneath. Don't let them define your value. Don't let them buy you out cheap. If you're the one breaking the cycle in your family, type "I am the architect" in the comments. Let's build something new together.